Well, hello, everybody. Thanks again for joining us for our live series talking about money disrupted. And in this episode, we have an amazing guest, Mr. John Deaton. So I'll add John here to the studio. Hello, John. How you doing?
What's up, Chris? I'm doing well, brother. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks again for chatting with me. This is the second documentary team up we've had here. You were obviously the star of Rig from the Start, also known as XRP Unleashed. You helped us unpack the SEC's battle against crypto. And now we're kind of on to, I think, an even more important topic for the American people, which is the affordability crisis we're in. And one of the key themes in Money Disrupted is talking about why that is. So
couldn't be more relevant. You know, you were on money when it came to the SEC stuff, and look at what a difference it is. It brought a lot of recognition to what was going on. You did an outstanding job at that. Excited to watch this documentary. You're a talented producer. I'm not just saying that. You didn't ask me to say it. You didn't pay me to say it. Well, no, but it's great. And this, I believe career politicians have robbed young people of their prosperity. And that's why we're in the crisis that we're in, the affordability crisis that we're in. And it's why I'm running for U.S. Senate again, because I want to do something about it. But let's go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, it is a big theme. You know, when I started following the money, there's no better source or bigger source of money than the Federal Reserve. And you look at, politicians promising free this and free that. And especially for those of us in extra blue states, Massachusetts, where you're at, Los Angeles, California, where I am, is, always another tax, always another tax, always another tax. And it just feels like we're a never ending tax. And stuff's just getting more and more expensive. So I'm going to start the whole conversation off by showing just a 1-minute clip of you from this documentary, Money Disrupted, where we talk about the affordability problems in housing and specifically in your neck of the woods in the Boston metro area.
All right. To our constitutional republic or our democracy, however you want to describe America, and that is the wealth gap. The difference between the haves and the have-nots in this country is at an all-time high.
There are people worth $4 billion. There's 350,000 ultra high worth net people, 30 million or more, and there is 3,500 billionaires on planet Earth right now, and it's going up every day.
Right now, we have a $37 trillion deficit. Credit card debt's at $1.2 trillion with delinquencies at an all-time high. You have student loan debt at $1.8 trillion with delinquencies nearing all-time highs. The average home in Massachusetts, where we're at right now, is $650,000. The area that we sit, Greater Boston area, $1.1 million. Regular people are being priced out of the economy.
So just a little clip from the documentary kind of gives me like what's going on here. And I definitely feel a lot of that pain here in California as well. And I think everybody's feeling it creep up. So talk to me about, what you observe in terms of like the catalyst. What's driving us towards this affordability crisis? It's all over the country too. It's not just those of us in these expensive metropolitan areas.
Well, if I had to pinpoint a specific period of time, I would pinpoint the 2008 financial crisis, because that decision, and I have to say this, and we're not here, just to talk politics, obviously, but my opponent, Ed Markey, who's been in DC since 1976. I'm not sure you were alive, by the way.
I wasn't.
There you go. He voted to bail the banks out, right? The banks that caused the crisis, the greed, all of that, the government decided to bail them out. And that's when we began operating in this country at 1.5 trillion or more. So it started at $1.5 trillion annual deficits to today, 2 trillion annual deficits. And people need to understand, I know you and I have talked about this, Chris, but the number trillion gets thrown around today so easily, and it is mind-blowing. You know, when I was young, a little kid, they would talk about government spending in the millions. Oh, this would cost millions. When I got to college, which would be in the late 80s, the government talked about government spending in the billions, in the billions. Today, they'll be like, well, this is only going to cost 1.4 trillion. This is only going to be 2.1 trillion. And what people need to know is how incredibly large the number trillion is. They just need to Google how many years is a trillion sequence equal. It's like 34,000 years. If you took $1 trillion, single dollar bills, and you stacked them, you could reach the sun and be on your way back to Earth. That's how big a trillion is. It is, your human mind can't really comprehend that number. And they do 2 trillion a year in deficits. They hit this print button. Like, you know, it's really digitally created, but everybody knows what the printer is. It's a digital print. They just press a computer button, boom, there's $2 trillion created out of thin air, as if a magician did it. It's incredible. And, you know, we're no longer on the gold standard. There's nothing backing the US dollar. And so that's what has happened because of that, because of the incessant printing of money. It's devalued every dollar again and again and again. The US dollar has lost 20% in 5 years of its value. Since that time, 2008, you want to know who's done well in America? People who own things, okay? When you print that much money, create that much of supply, and you devalue the US dollar, things rise, assets rise. So if you own real estate, you've done okay. If you own stocks, you've done okay. If you own bonds, you've done okay. Bitcoin, XRP, whatever. You've done well because you own things. You want to know who doesn't own things? 50% of America. The bottom 50% are in debt. This is a striking number, and it is sad. It genuinely gets me emotional, man. And that is hardworking people, regular people. They don't even have, we're talking 60%, 6 out of 10 Americans don't have $500 set aside in case of an emergency. $500. So I've lived this life. So I want you to imagine you got kids, you got bills, you're driving your car, and in your car, you got that little Mickey Mouse spare tire, that little round thing, that donut, they call it. You don't have a real tire, and you're praying that you don't get a flat tire, that you don't have a tire blowout, because that's going to cost you $400. And if you experience that $400, that $500, emergency, we'll call it, you don't pay your rent. You don't get your electric bill. You're behind. I mean, that's called debt slavery, man. That's not participating in the American dream. And it's because of career politicians. And I don't care if they got an R in front of their name, and I don't care if they got a D in front of their name. Career politicians, like the guy I'm going against, who voted, by the way, for that bailout. And let me tell people out there, because I know you got me going, and I'll let you get a question in.
No, you're good. You're good.
Yeah. Let me just share with you that when people say, oh, we had to bail the banks out because of systemic risk, and we did it for the American people. You have FDIC insurance in your account up to $250,000. How many people got more than $250,000 in a bank account? No, you bailed out the banks. You bailed out the billionaires when you did that. There was no reason to start pumping trillions of dollars in debt to bail out those banks. And ever since that period of time, it's just gotten worse and worse and worse. And we're paying the price, man. And now regular people they just can't afford to live. And it's tragic. And what happens is they start turning to charismatic socialists, for example, in New York. Charismatic guy that talks about affordability and says, hey, I can I can give you free transportation. I can lower your rent. I can lower your groceries. And then people say, why would people fall for that? If you got cancer and a charismatic surgeon doctor comes up to you and says, I can cure your cancer, you're going to get that person's attention. And if someone comes along and says, I can make life more affordable for you, then they're going to listen. And of course, we know that socialism isn't going to work, but we also got to accept that capitalism, the way it's being practiced today, is not working for regular people. Okay. And I am a true blood American capitalist, free market capitalist. In fact, maybe at some point we'll talk about my innovation dividend idea. Okay.
Sounds good. Yeah, I like that idea. Actually, it's right on script for, so a section in the middle of the documentary. Well, the first clip we played was like from the very beginning where we're setting the stage. Everybody's feeling inflation. We understand that the cost of goods is going up. We understand that even if they tell us inflation is 3%, in practice, it's more like 10 to 15%. When you look at the CPI chart, which is the chart consumer price index that, tells you how much stuff actually costs. And I think that the American people are sort of in a place where the government can say, inflation is only 2.5, 3%. But when they look at their utility bill, when they look at their grocery bill and other types of expenses, they're not seeing that reflected. So we try to pinpoint where that started. You mentioned something about the bailouts, and a lot of people, when they think about bailouts, think about the 2008 financial collapse. But there's a period of bailouts that happened in a generation before that. So in this, we're going to look at the bailouts that took place in the 70s and when we sort of transitioned from capitalism to crony capitalism as it happened after we moved off the gold standard. So here's a little clip from that section about the U.S. government starting their whole piece of bailing the big industries out.
The ailing Chrysler Corporation.
Big, luxurious, beautiful.
I am a true capitalist. I believe in individual capitalism. I don't believe in bailing out the banks, bailing out General Motors. We bailed General Motors out. You wanna know why we bailed them out? Because they made a shitty car, right? But if you open up a pizza parlor down the corner from here and you make a shitty pizza, I bet you go out of business.
So there's just a little tiny sliver of, us talking about how in the 70s they started all these big bailouts. I included Lockheed Martin there because in reality, the bailout in the 70s is relatively small. But when you look at the military industrial complex, when you look at the amount of money being spent into the military or into other big government contractors, it's an enormous amount of money. I mean, it's in the trillions for a lot of those guys, Boeing, Lockheed, all those guys. But it's also large in the banking industry. The numbers get bigger and bigger as time goes on. So I think you make a great point there. Crony capitalism, if you open a crappy pizza joint, it doesn't work. And that's a great metaphor for people. I picked the Chevy Malibu, by the way, because after you said that, I looked up, I literally Googled, what is the shittiest car ever made in America? And that was what came up. So I put the Malibu there. Sorry, Malibu drivers. I'm not trying to piss on your train, but that's what the internet says. That's the worst car ever made in America. So anyways, so what's kind of your thoughts on this? Are we still living in crony capitalist universe? And if so, like, what's our path out of this thing?
100%. And that's why I said I'm a true capitalist. You seem to always, the government just seems to bail out these major corporations, but Main Street never gets bailed out. I mean, if you look at what happened with the banks, for example, General Motors, Chrysler, airlines, and people need to understand bankruptcy today isn't like it used to be in the olden days. In the olden days, before I was born even, if you went bankrupt, you closed your door. Now we have bankruptcy reorganization. Warren Buffett has made a fortune by buying companies out of bankruptcy. Owens Corning Fiberglass went bankrupt with 18,000 employees, and 5 years later they had 19,000 employees, and they were bought in bankruptcy. So it is cronyism, and do we have it today? 100%. And we don't have to look any further than the healthcare industry. We shut down the government, right? Or career politicians did, over this healthcare issue. And this is what I said when I announced the Affordable Care Act was never, ever going to be affordable. And it's because it allowed three vertically integrated insurance companies. And when I say vertically integrated, that means from manufacturing down to the pharmacy, to the retail. They own all of that vertically, and there's three of them, and they control 85% of every prescription drug in America and over 90% of every provider network on the insurances. So that's not capitalism, man. That is crony capitalism. That is monopolistic capitalism. And we faced this one time, Chris. We faced it before, but there was a period of time in our country where there was a similar. The wealth gap was like it is today, and you had crony capitalism. And it was a Republican, believe it or not, by the name of Teddy Roosevelt, who came in, and in my opinion, he saved capitalism. And we need that approach today. He came in and he bust the trust, and he took on the oil barons and the railroad tycoons that had cornered the market the way let's say the three insurance companies are doing the healthcare industry. And he broke them up, and it increased competition, and small businesses thrived. And we need that approach today. We need someone to come in and break up that cronyism. For example, in our healthcare, it's insane that we can't basically shop for the best price. Chris, you have a microwave at your house or apartment?
Yes, I do.
Okay. If that microwave were to go out of commission, let's say it blew up, and you needed a microwave, what would you do? And you and I haven't talked about this. I want everybody to know live. You had no idea I was going to ask you any questions.
Nothing about the microwave. I'd probably just go to Amazon, to be honest, and check reviews.
Well, here you go, though. But you would be able to shop online. And what you could do for a refrigerator or a microwave or any of these things is you could spend hours nationwide looking at brands and prices and options and which microwave you're going to buy, where you're going to buy it. Yep. Try doing that for insulin and Coumadin, which is blood thinner, and other life-saving drugs. You can't do it? You can't do it. Does that make any freaking sense on any planet? And if we allow more transparency and we get more competition, when you get more competition, you get prices down. You give consumers options. That is capitalism. This crony capitalism, this monopolistic capitalism that we have is not working. Look what the banks are doing, right? JP Morgan Chase and Morgan Stanley and Chase and all that. Look how they're fighting crypto and trying to prevent consumers from having options when it comes to yield and things of that nature. Right. Yep. We can eliminate that, man. We've got to have career politicians who are not going to sell out, who will go into Washington, like Teddy Roosevelt said, and said, I'm going to break this up. You don't get to have 90% of the market and control the prices for people. That should be divided up by multiple companies. True capitalism is what we need in this country.
Yeah, I know. A lot of folks, it becomes an argument. Oh, well, if you had a free market, this would all be solved, but then it's going to end up like Canada, and we're going to have lines, for healthcare or whatever. You hear that argument, but the reality is that we are not in a capitalistic society, like you mentioned. When you look at the cost of goods across the board, I was showing the chart while you were talking of the average, the FRED, which is the official index from the central bank, their view on medical expenses, which is just up and to the right, but cost of goods up and to the right, house up and to the right, and they're all correlated to money supply up and to the right. The more we print, the more this stuff goes up. But to make it worse, when I interviewed Ron Paul, one of the things that stood out to me the most about his interview, and it's in the documentary, he said, this is what the deep state is. It's you get another lobbyist, you go to Washington, you pass your policies, and you get those policies pushed out. So the money matriculates from the federal government into these agencies, into these organizations, these companies that basically pick their candidates, right? And put their candidates up to pass the laws so that at the end of the day, they just want to spend more, spend more, spend more. The problem now is that we are in the end of that system because it's starting to become so overly stuffed with spending. We don't have much of a runway left for fiat dollars because we're no longer in the position we were globally after Bretton Woods. We're not really the reserve currency of the world. We were with OPEC for a long time. It's just, I think, explains not your policy, but me viewing it explains the reason why the United States is messing around the Middle East so much around energy policy and so on. And now we're kind of in this place with the BRICS nations where there's a real challenge to the dollar happening globally, and we're printing so much. It's kind of like history repeats itself, right? The Europeans were the first after the Bretton Woods Agreement, for those unfamiliar with that, which basically meant the US dollar was used for transfer between countries. From country to country, the dollar was the standard. And then you could convert that to gold. We're kind of in the similar situation now where I feel like a lot of the global economies are sort of moving away from the US dollar as a mode of exchange between country to country. So as you kind of play this out, I agree with you in terms of like getting in and cleaning up, like Teddy Roosevelt. Maybe you'll be our Teddy Roosevelt. Go out there and kind of clean that up. Do you ever see us kind of? I asked Ron Paul this, and you don't know what he said, so I'm going to ask you this same question, see what you responded. I'll tell you what Ron Paul told me. What do you see as sort of the end game with the monetary crisis in terms of the printing of money, the continuous lobbyist dollars flowing out? And we're seeing a lot of fraud, waste, and abuse get uncovered, which is good. We need to reduce federal government, federal spending, and it's great to catch crooks who are basically stealing money from the government. That is valuable, but that can only go so far. There's also just spending in general. So play it out. I mean, in your mind, I want to show one more picture, well, I'll show it after we talk about this. In your mind, where do you see as sort of the path that the Federal Reserve is on, but / which I exchange with, the path the Federal Reserve is on, and by extension, the path Congress is on to continuously spend at this level? What's the end game here? Where are we going with spending, and what do we think is going to happen with the U.S. government budget over the next little while, few years, decade or so?
I think we're in for a reckoning. Is what I believe. We're going to have to accept the fact that what got us here, and I'm not smart enough to tell you necessarily. I'm certainly not on the level of Ron Paul's intelligence when it comes to these matters, but we're a lot. I used to say years ago, we're headed off a cliff. We're headed off a cliff. We've already went off the cliff. Now, a lot of people don't realize it, but we're off the cliff and we're free falling. And there's a reckoning to happening. I think we can recover, but that runway that you talked about, imagine a plane, landing. We just don't have enough of an airstrip left if we don't institute some real change. I mean, Elon Musk went to Washington talking about knocking $1 trillion off, and he was thrown out. I don't care what your opinion of Elon Musk is, whether you're a fan or not, but the richest man in the world, arguably the greatest entrepreneur of our time, the mind of our time when it comes to intelligence, genius, all that, was thrown out of Congress, of Washington. And I mean, at the end of the day, have we even gotten $100 billion or $10 billion in fraud? I don't know. But this game we've got to have radical change. And I posted the other day, basically what I call the Washington Clean Hands Act. It's multiple acts that we have to clean. For example, you can't be a lobbyist. If you're an elected official and you leave Washington, go home, go retire, go back to private sector, whatever. You don't get to stay in Washington and be a lobbyist. If you're the head of the FDA on Friday and you resign, you don't get to be on Moderna and Pfizer's board on Monday. If you're the SEC chair on Friday and you resign, you don't get to be running the Apollo Group thereafter 2 weeks later. We've got to clean Washington up. We got to restore ethics back in our government. Otherwise, no one thinks that the United States can experience hyperinflation the way that Zimbabwe or the way Argentina or in the way that others have. And I'm not suggesting that in the next several years we're going to experience hyperinflation to that extent, but we have got to come up with a solution and stop spending money. But I don't see them stopping. So when you say what's the end game, Chris, I don't see them changing anything. I think that we're going to see a return, especially in the midterm. We have the midterm elections, of which I'm a part of this year. And I think you're going to see the federal government pump a couple $1 trillion into the economy. And what that's going to do, it's going to cause prices to increase, and it's going to exasperate the condition. And so I am fascinated to hear what Ron Paul had to say as far as the reckoning we face or the end game.
Yeah. I mean, so basically,
it shows you I'm looking forward to your
to the documentary.
Yeah. Not just to watch myself.
No, it's not. I mean, it's not 2 hours.
I'm a very small part, rightfully so.
It's a big, group of people who are all very intelligent about this topic, who not all of them agree either. I think it's, there are some people who don't agree with some parts of the crypto side of the story that I have a thought about, but there is a general consensus, and the general consensus is we are all against the fiat dollar, right? The non-asset backed, or fiat basically means order by decree. I learned that from Lawrence Lepard. Order, it has value by decree. We decree that it has value, and therefore it does, through the honor and faith of the United States government, but it really has nothing behind it at all. There's nothing there of value. So when I asked Ron Paul, what's going to happen? Should we be campaigning on, getting the next group of people in here that are going to want to end the Federal Reserve? Or are we going to want to do some set of bills to try to do balanced budgets or some kind of constitutional amendment? And he basically said, we don't have to do anything because it's going to undo itself. It's going to undo itself on its own because of the unsustainability of it, right? You're going to have to reset. You're going to have to do a monetary reset. We're in the fourth turning. You're going to have to do a monetary reset. And Congress will only act when it has to, right? Just like when a budget doesn't pass or something gets stuck and it's like, okay, it's either this or we don't move forward. I think that's something I read over in your proposal for the clean hands thing that I liked, which was like simplifying the law language. How often have you seen one of those congressional hearings where they're holding up 10,000 pages and they're like, we got 10,000 pages last night? Like, I'd have to feed that to Chat GPT to understand what those 10,000 pages are.
Just so every people know, it's a very simple approach. Guess what? We have single issue bills.
Yep.
Period. The Ukraine funding bill should probably be called the Ukraine funding bill.
Absolutely.
Right. It shouldn't have Ukraine funding, Israel funding, Haiti funding, Social Security, educational things. This omnibus 2,000-page bill that none of them read. Mm-hmm. It should be, here's a 5-page spending bill for Israel. Let's say we're going to give, there's a proposal to give Israel money, or it could be Ukraine, or it could be anything, any bill, any issue it is. That's all. That's what we need to do. And they don't want to do it because they want to keep feeding the monster call the monster the deep state, call it bureaucracy, call it whatever you want. I call it a monster.
No, I agree. I mean, I think it's the real thing, which is the lobbyists that often put these people in power, and then we see them, cash in, and sometimes that's the revolving door of Washington. So maybe that's a person who's appointed to a position and then rotates out to the industry that they helped. Hey, hey, Exxon guy, or
hey, I got a bill, as you know. When you leave that government regulatory agency, you can't take a job for 3 to 5 years in the industry that you just regulated. Period.
Right.
We got to clean it up, man.
We all know the story of Bill Hinman, right? Jay Clayton from the XRP days, like they rotated back into their industry, but that's not unique. That's not a unique story. That's
I mean, you had I forget his name, Scott something. He was the FDA chair.
Mm-hmm.
And 2 weeks after he left the Federal Drug Administration, he was on the board of Pfizer. I mean,
right.
That just looks awful. Like, and I'm not. Let's say the guy never did anything wrong. Like, he certainly didn't do anything illegal by doing that. It just looks wrong. And we have laws that say that even the appearance of impropriety is impropriety. Right? Mm-hmm. Because you lose faith in the agency, you lose faith in the system. And how many Americans do you think have faith in our institutions, in our systems today? I would say it's at an all-time low of my lifetime. And I'm pretty old. I'm a lot older than you. And it's at an all-time low, whether it's the FBI or the SEC or the EPA or whatever.
Yeah, the FBI.
And the FBI, listen, these non-government organizations, the NGOs, mm-hmm. I got a pretty simple approach. There can be exceptions, but if the government is not allowed to do the underlying activity, then why is the government allowed to fund the underlying activity?
Excellent point.
And I'm not, again, some NGOs out there will do good work. I'm not, but you can make an exception to the rule. But right now, we've got billions and billions and billions of dollars being funneled. I mean, Stacey Abrams ran for, governor, or I believe it was of Georgia, and she loses, and then like within a year, she's got $1 billion NGO.
Right. Yeah.
In an area that she wasn't even an expert in.
Absolutely.
Right. And I mean, we're seeing all these congressmen and women literally be net negative. What's your net worth? Negative $50,000. 5 years later, $20 million net worth. We live in the corruption era, Chris. I've been saying it for years. We're living in the corruption era, and we're headed for a reckoning.
I mean, yeah, this is obvious, right? Everybody knows Nancy Pelosi's the best trader. She's better than Warren Buffett. She outtrades Warren Buffett, the GOAT, so there's no way you get to be a GOAT trader. Like, that's a prime example, right? Here's the publicly known industry best, Berkshire Hathaway, who just retired, Mr. Warren Buffett, best trader, famous for trading. He's getting on average a 22% return year on year with that firm. And Nancy Pelosi is outperforming him by 2, 3, 5, 10x. And that's just one example. And off of the salary in the Senate, as you know, which is a couple $100,000. So there's no way that that's possible unless you have the information, which allows you to play the game, to understand the when the rug pulls are coming and everything else. So it's definitely a challenge. Speaking of rug pulls, I have a little clip about somebody who doesn't like rug pulls. Your prior competitor, Senator Elizabeth Warren. I want to show you a little clip from later in the documentary. So we take the history of the monetary system, the Federal Reserve, its formation. We look at the Bretton Woods, Nixon taking us off the gold standard, bailouts, 2008 financial collapse. But then we look in the more recent time as the banking industry realized, oh my gosh, there's a competitor in the room, maybe we need to stop that competitor. And so we talk a little bit about the war on crypto, just in a small slice, but here's a little bit from that section that you're in.
Help protect investors on crypto exchanges.
If you would have said to me, what is the worst thing the government can do against crypto and innovation? John, write out the worst thing you can think of. I would not have been able to articulate how bad the Biden administration and Elizabeth Warren and that influence was.
It's a wild west out there. You know, if you were buying stock for speculation, you'd be protected by rules against things like pump and dump. According to Chainalysis, North Korean hackers stole a record $1.3 billion.
The illicit activity that we estimate at Chainalysis is less than 1% of the overall activity that occurs on these blockchains, which is equivalent to what we see in traditional markets.
Okay, so she's in a hearing, just for context, because you didn't know about that clip. Maybe you've seen it somewhere, but she's in a hearing with Chainalysis, which is a great company that does blockchain analysis. And she's basically saying her regular, back in the day, Larry Fink and others were saying this publicly. Crypto is for people who are frauds or whatever. It's like a narrative. And then Chainalysis in that hearing is like, well, actually, it's like the same amount of illicit activity, or maybe less than like cash is or dollars are. So it's kind of like in her own hearing. By the way, that's the same back and forth hearing. That's not special editing. That's the same hearing. That's Chainalysis responding to her.
Listen, the one thing I learned after debating Elizabeth Warren twice is she never lets truth get in the way, man. Never going to let truth get in the way of a narrative that she wants. I mean, and here's the fact. Let's say that 1%, it's less than 1%, but let's say 1% has been used for illicit purposes. That doesn't mean that you ban the technology. I mean, Chris, do you think that an ATM machine has ever been used in a drug deal?
100%. I've seen narcotics.
Ever been used for prostitution?
Yeah, 100%.
Ever been used for whatever? That doesn't mean, oh my God, we got to ban ATM machines now. That's just a stupid way to conduct business. What you do is you punish the bad guys in a very severe way. Like I won Consumer Advocate of the Year. I've been fighting for consumers, retail investors against the SEC. That's my heart, man. Mm-hmm. So I want to protect consumers at all costs. And so I'm someone who's a fierce believer in punishing fraudsters. But you can do that while fostering innovation. You don't come to the table. The problem with Elizabeth Warren is that she really wants there to be 5 banks, and then she can control those 5 banks. That's what she wants. I want there to be where you don't even need a bank, right? That we're our own bank, that we don't need to rely on the middlemen that way. And so that was the whole idea. For me, crypto was all about capitalism and consumer protection. My mother, as you know, received a welfare check. And what people got to know is that I'm old. There wasn't direct deposit when I was 8 years old or 7 years old. My mother's welfare check would come in the mail by the mailman. And then the bank, you had to have a minimum deposit of like $10 or something. My mother couldn't keep it. We needed the money. So they would hit her with these fees. So she stopped going to the bank, because if she took her check to the bank, they would take it all in fees that racked up. So she go to the check cashing stores in the inner city, right? You go to the inner city, you'll see Lotto, check cashing, Western Union, liquor, those stores, and they would take 15%. Western Union, I would send her money when I was in college. They would take 12%. I'm trying to send my mom $100. She gets $88 at best because she didn't have a bank account. And so to me, it was like, wow, we can eliminate that. And we can eliminate predatory fees. We can eliminate the middlemen. Right. If you have one of these, a smartphone, create an internet, you can, make a living selling shirts or hats, and you live in Argentina. I mean, that's all. Crypto, someone like you, an independent talented producer, who you might be able to have opportunities where you're not necessarily tied to the, to these middlemen and things of that nature. So.
No, yeah. When you talk about that, one of the themes we have in the documentary is the great centralization of services. So that's basically very similar to what we saw in the Gilded Age. You're talking about Teddy Roosevelt, to bring it full circle. In the Gilded Age, which is turn of the century, late 1800s, early 1900s for the audience. That is the period where we saw.
Think Rockefellers and Rothschilds.
Exactly. Those are the Rothschilds are still kind of around, but all of those players, had a great monopoly. I saw a analysis that J.P. Morgan, one of the greatest sort of bankers of that time period, which J.P. Morgan Chase, still one of the biggest banks in the world, is the biggest bank in the world publicly, at least. That at one point, effectively, J.P. Morgan had control of like 50 to 70% of the entire S&P 500. So they basically had control of 70% of the entire industry. When you talked about banks, here's a number to think about. Like, we have been on a slow decline of regional banks. So we are now at basically a historic low of banks, a total number of banks, especially region banks, regional credit unions. And there's a great consolidation. So the prime example that happened in 2008 financial collapse is they allowed for smaller banks to go under and medium-sized banks to get absorbed by the biggest banks, which is sort of the consolidation play. And that happens across lots of industries. It's in the telecommunication space with media. There's really only 5 media companies. And so that's a challenge when those 5 media companies control lots of different assets, but they control a lot of avenues. And I think it's changing some, but there's still editing in lots of algorithmic, downvoting of certain topics and things like that happened that hurt our free speech. I certainly see it. I've been banned off YouTube once before. And many people I talk to have been banned on X and YouTube, TikTok, this kind of thing, which shouldn't happen at all, unless you're like doing something that's putting porn on there or something. But like otherwise, like we should be able to have a conversation. We're not doing anything crazy, right?
Right.
And that consolidation is in the payment sector as well. So that was another area where I asked Ron Paul, his perspective. What do you think of crypto? He's like, I don't understand it, but as a libertarian free market person, I believe that it should be allowed and that we should have multiple challenges or challengers to the US dollar. And a little history lesson that people may not know, but in the Constitution, when they were originally trying to figure out how to value money, they passed this law in like 1781. I think it's the Coins and Measures Act that gave Congress the ability to measure gold, because the number one currency we were exchanging was the Spanish medallion back in that period. And we had the Continental, which was worthless paper. So the fiat money thing kind of continues on in history. We see that happen time and time again. And so, John, is there any other topics you want to bring up before we close out, kind of get into the top of the hour? I know you had mentioned there's maybe something you're starting to do with like another potential lawsuit or something on behalf of people.
Well, I mean, one thing I want to highlight about what I mean by capitalism, and then I'll tell you about the lawsuit real quick. Yeah. I have this idea called the innovation dividend. And Chris, what that is that taxpayers are the number one venture capitalists in the world, but we never see the upside.
Right.
It was public money that started the internet, GPS, you name some of the greatest technologies. And this is the best way for me to phrase it. Harvard has a $59 billion endowment, right? They have this huge $60 billion endowment, yet they get $500 to $600 billion a year. $500 to $600 million in federal grant money, in federal subsidies, tax dollars money. And then they use it for research and development. Then they make a breakthrough in technology. And then Harvard will license that technology. Let's say it's in vaccines. They'll then license it to Moderna, Pfizer, and whoever, and they collect $150 to $200 million in fees and royalties for a breakthrough in technology that our dollars helped create.
Right.
But we don't see any of it. Harvard sees it all, and the companies see it all. So my idea is like, if tax dollars helped create a breakthrough, then there'll be a 1 to 2%, whatever the figure is, of royalties that go into a national innovation trust, and then there'll be a dividend to taxpayers. We see in the upside of that our dollars created. If you don't receive any federal funds, no, you don't receive any taxpayer dollars, fine. Then that's capitalism. You took the risk, you take it. But if taxpayers take the risk, we should see something. That is giving each American taxpayer invested in their economic future, in innovation, in technology. If our tax dollars help the AI revolution, we should see some of it, right? And that's just a simple idea. Alaska has something similar with their right. And that, I mean, all right. And that's sort of taken from that. And so that's just one idea of trying to bring real capitalism to the individual and show that the individual gets to participate and not just this corporate cronyism that's going on. I did just recently file, me and other taxpayers in Massachusetts, the 72% of the voters in Massachusetts in November of 2024 voted to allow the state legislature, the auditor, to open the books and look and see where our tax dollars are going and how it's being spent. Right now, there is no oversight. So 72% of the voters, which is very hard to do, to get 72% people to agree. Right. They said, yes, we want the audit, and the politicians say no. They're literally saying, we're not going to let you look at the books. And it's because we know corruption is taking place. Right. Fraud has already been reported, but they won't open the books. So me and 28 other taxpayers sued the state legislature, and we're going to try to force it. Based on the same kind of theory when I sued the SEC on a writ of mandamus, where I was asking them to follow the law, the SEC follow the law. It's the same similar. I'm asking the state legislature to follow the law and allow the audit to take place. You know, we have to fight back government overreach and intrusion, man. I'm someone who believes the government needs to get off our backs and out of our pockets and provide the basic services that we need, roads and bridges and all of those things, but get out of the way, man, and let individuals thrive and small businesses thrive. I believe that our current system is killing capitalism. I really believe that. I believe that we are I don't even, if you look at to wrap it up, if you look at the healthcare we talked about, those 3 vertically integrated insurance companies, Chris.
Yeah.
Did you know that they get $100 billion a year in federal subsidies?
Yeah, it doesn't surprise me at all.
So if they're getting our federal tax dollars, that's not capitalism, man. That's socialism. It's corporate socialism, is what I'm saying. Where they've created, when the Federal Reserve was created, and I'm someone who supports ending the Federal Reserve, and I'm someone who encourages, I know it's in your thing. There you go. I'm wearing the same sweater right now.
Yeah, but, we're on brand. Yeah.
Yeah. I know Massey favors it. The book of the Jekyll,
Creature of Jekyll Island.
The Creature of Jekyll Island. You mentioned Lawrence Leppert, his book, The Big Print. All these are great books to read. And when you realize that bankers got together and they figured out a way to privatize the gains, and socialize the risk.
Absolutely.
I want everybody to think about that. They created a system where the risk was socialized so that all of us would pay for any bad decisions, but they get to keep all the upside. That's a system that is flawed and inherently corrupt. And so I think if most Americans learned how these private bankers got together and figured out a way to basically create the system that they did for themselves, they would all join us in saying, let's get rid of this and go back to a pre-Fed system.
Exactly. Without the Federal Reserve, Lawrence Lepard told me in his interview, spending is the third rail in politics. And no one wants to say, it's getting more popular, thankfully. Hey, we want audits of the government. Nobody wants to waste money, right? And we know it's corrupt. And what's happening in Minnesota and other places is starting to illustrate the scale of this. And I think we are at the very edge of the iceberg in terms of the really big states like California that have a lot of spend, $22 billion on homeless. Where is it? Don't know. Can't pass the audit. Newsom's running for president. Great. Who's going to elect this guy? Just let's not let history escape these people. Hold them accountable for the fraud, waste, and abuse that they've overseen for decades. Many of them are career politicians, as you know. But I think that the other piece of what you're talking about is very powerful, which is that's the positive side, that we need to have ownership in the national reserves of our country, right? If I'm a citizen of this nation, I should be able to own some of that. That's why you look at like what you ever seen that famous interview with the Dubai prince, who's like, you guys in America, you work 6 months for nothing, 7 months for nothing. There's a famous clip there where you're just paying tax, and there's the income tax everybody knows about, and then there's for some states state tax, but then there's inflation on top of that, and it doesn't flow back to you. It's if we actually spent what we spent on services, we'd have probably the most futuristic country on earth, and we would all have healthcare, we'd all have schools, we'd all have everything if we were spending that budget actually on those things. But we don't. That money goes, everybody knows that money goes, into the coffers or into the pockets of the people who pass those laws, the politicians, and by extension, the corporations that they represent. And so that's why we have to disrupt the system. We have to restart our monetary system and hold transparency. And that's one of the great things about blockchain. It's a public ledger. What a concept, what you're trying to achieve in Massachusetts, right? We're trying to see what's on the ledger, who's spending what where. And if we could all audit the Pentagon, I guarantee you we could figure out where the money was going. They just don't want us to know.
No, and all public spending should be on the blockchain. I should be able, as a United States citizen, to get on this phone and access the blockchain to see where my tax dollars are going. And, they'll never want that kind of transparency. And that's why, this audit in Massachusetts, just think about that. They're saying, no, we're not going to let the people
who voted
look at the books. Right. Look at the books and see how their money's being spent. But here's another 13% tax increase. That's insane. But anyways, always a pleasure to be on with you. Telling everybody out there, I've only seen the clips that you've put out. I'm looking forward to it. I'm sure it's good. You've got heavyweights in there. It's an honor to be, like part of it where, you've got Lawrence, you've got Ron Paul. Don't you got the author of Jekyll Island?
Yes, G. Edward Griffin.
Yeah.
And so is Robert Kiyosaki, a history,
there you go. Yeah. And Gary, the clip you showed of my friend Gary Cardone, great guy. He's right. If you actually look at the demographic, billionaire is the highest increase in demographic that's increasing. I think when I ran for Elizabeth Warren, I looked it up, and it was like 168 billionaires in America. And I think now it's like, 230, 240, or it's something significant as far as a percentage. I could ask AI and it would tell us, I'm sure, how many billionaires that we have, but it
says that the number is in the United States. It's something between 800 and 1,000 people.
Oh my goodness.
It's insane.
It's worse. It's worse than I thought. Is what I'm saying. And that's because of the assets.
Yeah.
And there's things we can do. And this is what I want people to understand. I know we're all going over, but what people need to understand is when you get such a disparity, then nonsense starts being attractive to regular people. So when someone says we need to tax 5% of all the billionaires on their unrealized gains, now that's a truly un-American concept, that you're going to tax me or somebody who's a billion. I'm nowhere near a billion, of course, but we're going to tax their unrealized.
You're talking about the California billionaires tax.
Right. If you take, right. And so that doesn't make any sense. But if person who doesn't have stuff and they're struggling and they're told, yeah, you know, this billionaire, they can take $100 million loan on their assets and they don't pay any income taxes because it's not income, it's a loan. And it's going to offend people. So there's things we can do, like you should tax that as an unrealized. Like if you take $100 million loan on your unrealized gains, we don't tax your unrealized gains, but we'll treat that 100 million as income because you realized it. That's an easy thing to fix. But by not fixing it, then you're going to get people like Ro Khanna and others and AOC and Morin and, oh, we need to punish these billionaires and tax their unrealized gains. And it just starts sounding something that should never make sense to someone. It'll start, people who are struggling will then want to punish someone who's they feel is taking advantage, and the class warfare begins. And that's why, you know, when I was young and I was so poor, Chris, I did not hate rich people.
Right.
I wanted to talk to rich people. I want to ask them questions. How did you get there? What did you do? What advice can you give me? I want to be in your position one day. Today, we punish success, right? There's this, you got to hate the wealthy. You got to hate the rich. And it develops this punish success attitude. We got to reject all that kind of division, but we have to have common sense elected leaders who will tackle our problems. Anyways, sorry to get on a...
No, that's a very, let me just elaborate on that just very briefly, and then we'll get out of here. But when they first pushed the income tax on Americans in 1913, and this is important because we have to study our history, and that's exactly what I'm trying to do with this documentary. When income tax was sold to Americans, it's the same exact playbook they're trying to sell you on the billionaires tax. Oh, we're only going to tax the rich. The threshold for the income when income tax was passed in 1913 was you had to make $3,000 individually or $4,000 as a married couple. For calibration, the average income of the average American at the time was either $600 or $1,000 as a married couple. So there you go. That sounds very good. You're saying, okay, if these people will make 3-5 times as much as I make, we're going to tax them. And guess who pays all the tax today? It's not the rich. It's not anybody in that top income bracket. It's everybody in the middle class. Corporations don't pay as much. And certainly individuals that are over a certain net worth hold all of their assets. So that income piece is a total lie. And here we are now. Here's the dangerous part about a non-transactional tax, this thing in California, other than hurting innovation and pushing businesses out of the state, which is already taking place. It is a non-transactional tax that gives the government authority to look through all of your assets and decide, you know what, your house that you've lived in, or maybe your parents gave to you, maybe you lived there for 25 years and you're retired or something, you've been fortunate enough to be one of the few to pay off your house, that the equity in that house is somehow now part of your assets, and we got to tax you on that. Mm-hmm. That's the slippery slope. And I see it playing out the same way. I see states like California using that as a forensics tool to look through your assets. And then we're in a real heap of trouble because as the famous quote goes, in the future, you will own nothing and you will be happy about it. And that is kind of the dangerous slippery slope where we're going. So I'll end kind of on that note, but I really am very sensitive to that billionaires tax thing. And I, in fact, will leave California if that becomes a thing, especially the other comical thing is the mileage tax that they're talking about, putting a tax on everybody who drives.
Oh, they're tracking. They want to track miles here in Massachusetts as well. Hey, listen, if you don't mind me, I just want to throw out that if anybody wants to know more about my campaign, it's JohnDeatonForSenate.com. I'm terrible at plugging myself. So
okay. We'll put a link with the video. I think everybody.
I know that I'll get off and then I'll be like, hey, Christy or someone say, did you mention John Deaton for Senate? I go, no, I was talking policy and I was talking politics. And
oh yeah, John's running this election coming up in November. I don't know, when does early voting start in Massachusetts? When can you start voting?
It'll be in early October, probably. Yeah, Elizabeth Warren refused to debate me in September. I won the primary September 3rd. We asked for a debate September 5th, and all through September, she refused. She agreed to October 15th, but by that time, there had been 10 days of early voting. About 1 out of every 4 voters had already voted before I even could debate her. So it's a very incumbent-friendly system. But the good news this year is I don't have a primary opponent. I am the Republican nominee, and so we're going to shock the world. Nobody watching this is sitting around thinking, that Massachusetts Senate seat's in play in 2026. I'm not delusional, but you're going to get surprised. A lot of people are going to be shocked when they see come October, and they're like, whoa, wait a minute. You mean to tell me Deaton's only down 2 or up 2 or, that kind of thing? People are going to be shocked.
All right. Well, best of luck in that whole thing. I hope to talk to you again while you're, climbing that. And
Chris, when I win this thing and I'm a U.S. Senator, I will continue to talk to and be on the same shows that would have me, that had I had the honor to be asked to be on. I will continue to be on as a U.S. Senator because that's the only way you should be in life, right? I'm never going to be too big or something for the people who were there on the way up as well.
Well, I appreciate that. Well, thanks again, John. John appears in Money Disrupted, our documentary about the Federal Reserve and monetary crisis in America, and that is coming out next week on February 19th. That'll be available on our website, and I'm just going to close out and just show a little trailer of the documentary to close us out. But John, thanks so much for appearing.
Appreciate you, brother.
See you later.
You will find the heart of America here.
The decline of American manufacturing jobs is a serious concern, as many companies choose to move their operations overseas.
How did this dramatic income inequality happen on such a wide scale?
I have directed Secretary Connally to suspend temporarily the convertibility of the dollar into gold or other reserve assets.
The U.S. came off the gold standard August 15th, 1971, when Nixon closed the gold window. Since then, we've had floating exchange rates with the rest of the world.
The majority of Americans don't make enough money to cover some of the basic costs of living.
Every day is a struggle for me, but I still have to worry about where my next meal is coming from.
Even eggs has gone up to $5 or $6 per dozen.
It all began in November of 1910. The Federal Reserve System was conceived. But all these years, we've had something which most people have thought was a government operation of some kind or another.
It's not. What is it? It's a cartel.
There's been massive money creation in the U.S. When they create a lot of money, that devalues our buying power. And this has gone on to such an extent that 40% of all the money that's in existence in the U.S. dollar was now created since the pandemic.
Here you go, guys. Let's play central bank, because it's even easier than what I'm showing you. Originally, when we were on a gold standard, gold and silver were actually the money.
The only way we get out of the rat race of inflation and endless money printing and debt slavery is to return to sound money principles.
Bitcoin's now 16 years old. It's never been hacked. It's an extraordinary invention.
This is just the beginning. A new era of financial freedom where individuals can control their own money.
As you know, I was a skeptic.
Yes!
I believe Bitcoin is legitimate.
I'm a believer in stablecoin, a believer in blockchain.
I think crypto trading is going to become the infrastructure layer behind real-world assets.
We have to go back to sound money. We have to get our balance sheet in order. We have to stop irresponsibly spending money.
There's so many innovative technologies coming in, cryptocurrency, AI technology. What you should be doing is studying how to become an investor in those types of markets and those assets.
When I was in Zimbabwe, it collapsed, and these young kids come up with their AK-47s, and it's about taking your money. So when this collapsed, Law and Order collapsed. it's coming to America.
The rising cost of food is driving an affordability crisis.
Crime on the rise.
A rise in crime.
We have a pandemic of lawlessness.
And the Fed.
And the Fed.
We want to end the Fed.
And the Fed, let's go.
And the Fed. And the Fed.